Welcome to Wellthing Talks. I am your host, Alicia Castillo Holley, bringing you real-life conversations from Silicon Valley or somewhere around the world. We will talk about disruptors, angel investments, venture capital, and of course, family offices. Join me along with my children, their families, friends, disruptors, and investors as we explore the fascinating world of creating wealth in a completely different and authentic way. So thank you, everyone, to another very exciting podcast about innovation, passion, and venture capital. It is my pleasure to introduce Sam Shanes, the founder of Embr Labs, one of the companies that I invested in a long time ago and I continue to support. Sam, thank you so much for being here with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Alicia. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. How did you get to work on Embr Labs? What happened? How did you get to make that?
I met my co-founders while doing research in a lab as an undergrad back in 2013 at MIT. And we came together for this prototyping contest and came up with the original idea from being too cold in an over air-conditioned lab and having to put on sweatshirts in June. And we thought, this is crazy. What if we could just heat and cool ourselves directly? That would be a better way. So that was the inspiration. And then we said, okay, well, we'll prototype a wristband that could heat and cool, and never thinking it would go anywhere. But we built our first prototypes. We thought it felt really good. We started to tell people what we were working on, and the number one question we would get asked was, does it work for hot flashes? And that question and really that market has just pulled the technology and the product forward. And here we are 12 years later and 2 generations of hardware product, and proud to say that yes, this does help with hot flashes and many more things.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, I have mine. I didn't bring it because I'm at a conference, but whenever I bring it, everybody looks at it. And I was showing Embr Lab yesterday to a potential buyer for a large unit of users, and they are going to be exploring that for stress. So I gave her mine. I said, well, you have 3 days to try it and give it back to me. So it does much more than just manage hot flashes. So tell us a little bit more about what is the technology doing now and what has been the trajectory over these years?
Absolutely. So what we've learned is that temperature is really a pathway to the brain and to the root of our nervous system and how we feel. And so whenever you're feeling anything hot or cold, that's not just a sensation on your skin that's pleasant or unpleasant. It's actually a signal to the brain to impact your fight or flight response and your rest and digest response. So the product itself sounds very simple, and it's a wristband that heats and cools. But what we do that's very unique is how we heat and cool. We do so in waves of temperature change. It's not a constant temperature, but it's varying cooling and warming on very specific frequencies for very specific durations. And in doing so, we're actually creating that strong brain response. And that actually helps with not just hot flashes, but with sleep, with stress, with motion sickness even. We have customers using the product to manage the side effects of prostate cancer and breast cancer and ovarian cancer treatments. We have customers who have thermoregulatory disorders like MS or Raynaud's or dysautonomia using the product. And what all of that has at its core is it's the body's ability to balance the nervous system, and it's using cold and warm sensations to really keep you in that optimal state.
And you have a larger team now than when you started. How has been that process as an entrepreneur? Can you run us through that process?
Sure. It's I think it's one of the real joys of watching your idea grow is the ability to recruit amazing other people to join the company. And, that goes in stages. Some people are there for, a period of time. Some people are there for a longer period of time. It's ebbed and flowed. But, the real common theme is recognizing that, as an entrepreneur, you start out wearing all the hats as a founder, and the opportunity to take off a hat and to give it to someone who is really much more specialized than you are. So for me, one of the biggest examples there was I really served as the engineering lead for our first generation device. And that was a great learning experience for me. We got the product to market. It was a great product. I'm very proud of that. And then when we were getting ready to design our second generation device, we'd been able to hire, real dedicated engineers who had much more experience. And of course, they were able to, with that being their only job and their only hat, really focus and help us make this incredible product. And, we've seen that play out across the board. And, what you realize is when you can convince someone that, what you're working on is worth their time, that really is validation for what you're doing. And ultimately, a company is nothing more than a collection of people working towards a common goal. And the people you work with just determine so much about, not just whether you're going to be successful, but like what is your day-to-day experience. And if you care about your coworkers and they're good people that you want to spend time with, that's ultimately going to make your probability of success much higher because you're going to, be much more excited to come to work. And really happy to share that. Yeah, that's obviously the case at Embr.
That's fantastic. But through the process, there has to have been, this is horrible grammar, ugh, but there has to be some times where you didn't know if you were going to make it or not. How do you build up that resilience? That how do you go forward when you think things are hard? Because this is the part that most entrepreneurs don't talk about.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right that, we've been there, right? As a hardware company, it's very capital intensive. There have been many periods where our runway was measured in weeks and where, we didn't know if 8 weeks, 2 months later, we were going to be around. And I think how you get through that is first and foremost as a team. You can't do it alone. You have to rely on your co-founders, your leadership team, to some extent your investors, but most of all the core team. So that's one piece. The second piece, you have to have a support system outside that, you really have to find your family, your friends, make sure that you are creating that space and creating at least some time during the day when you're, not thinking about it because it can be all consuming and, that's not ultimately sustainable. And then, the last piece is one day at a time. Is that, okay, when your runway is measured in 8 weeks, every single day matters. And so can you just focus on moving the ball forward every day and know that if you do that, you may make it, you may not, but whatever happens, you'll look back and feel like you have no regrets. And, ultimately, most of your career is going to be looking back at this specific startup experience, right? It's very unlikely this is going to be a 30-year journey. And so you just want to be able to, at the end of the day, look back and say, hey, I can feel really proud of the work I did and like I gave it my all. And, if you do that, so far we've found that, that sort of act of letting go and trusting it, things have worked out.
Did you have any very specific lessons that you can share for other people that might be listening or watching that are earlier on or that are having some doubts? Or if you want to frame it in a different way, what is in the letter that you would have written to you at the beginning of your journey as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I'll provide two very specific pieces of feedback. So first is to build a weekly cash flow model and not financial statements, but true cash flow, dollars in, dollar out on a weekly basis, and to build it now so that when the time comes when your runway is low, you can really trust it. That's something that's absolutely essential. The more abstract version of that is to really understand finance as a core business and understand that accounting is the language of business. And so many engineers sort of take that for granted and think, oh, I know numbers, but it's more complicated for that. And it's more complicated that for a reason, right? There's a reason that, a balance sheet and an income statement and a cash flow are all different things. And, just having one piece of the puzzle, looking at your cash without understanding your liabilities doesn't give you a full picture. So, that's one piece, and it starts with a weekly cash flow model. The second piece of advice is to ask for help. So, for example, one of the ways in which you can really navigate that is to go to your vendors and people who you have accounts payable to and explain the situation and say, hey, I'm raising money. Can we have an extra 30 or 60 days to pay this? And so often, it's feels easier just to ignore it. But, that just burns bridges, where if you go in advance and you can explain things, you'll often find that people are willing to help. And even if they're not, and you still don't pay them, at least you've had that conversation, right? There ultimately may be times you need to say, hey, I'm really sorry, I can't pay you. And you're much better off to have that directly than for them to be, calling you frustrated after 30 or 60 days. So we've always found if you're honest with people and you explain the situation, people do their best to try to help you. And especially if you've built good relationships with your vendors and your suppliers and partners.
That's a great piece of advice. I haven't heard that in any of our interviews, but I remember there was a point in my time where I couldn't pay my rent. And I would call the landlady, and that was the only source of income for her. And I would call her up and I said, I am so sorry. I'm not going to be able to pay on time. And she would say, okay, what can you do? And I said, well, this is what I can do. I will pay these, but I just cannot pay right now. And I think one thing that a lot of people forget is to honor your word. And it is embarrassing, but you have to get up and just say, sorry, this is what is happening now. That is such a valuable lesson. And as you said, the vendors and anybody for that matters would work with you if they know that you are trustworthy, because you're going to honor, you're going to say what it is. That's so important. So thank you for that. And I'm gonna switch now to the fun and the energy. A lot of people ask, what keeps you awake at night? I'm like, what makes you stand up in the morning and say, I can't believe there's another day that I can live in? What gives you that burst of energy to just start the day and say, wow, this is another day? Great.
It's a great question. Three things come to mind. First is the team, is that, you show up for each other and you're excited to just connect on a personal level and say, hey, how do we move things forward? Second is the customer, is the person who says, I need this in my life. We were really fortunate, truly from the beginning of the company, to have people say, does this work for hot flashes? Are the biggest pain point in my life. And so we always had that group of people saying, I want this. And that continues to the day. And, at this point, we get the full feedback loop of hearing reviews from people who are using the product and saying, literally, this changed my life. And I always invite people to say, like, what was the last product you bought or used that you wrote to the company in the review saying this was life-changing? I can't think of that personally. So that is an incredible source of energy. And then the third is the opportunity to learn and grow. One of the biggest blessings about being a founder is you get to, have responsibilities that you wouldn't get in a bigger company. And, it pushes you out of your comfort zone. And of course, that's a double-edged sword, but if you zoom out, you say, hey, would I rather have a job that's challenging and where I'm learning new skills and where I get to experiment and, obviously sometimes fail, but also learn in the process? I would answer yes every time. And so those three things really keep me energized.
Great. Where can people find your product?
Our website is the best place to find it. So the product is Embr Wave. You can go to embrwave.com. The company's Embr Labs. Embrlabs.com redirect. So if you Google, Embr Labs or Embr Wave, you will find us, and you can try it for yourself.
How many people have used your product?
We've been really blessed to sell over 220,000 units.
Wow. Are you only selling in the US?
No, these days we can ship internationally to about 28 countries. So the EU, Australia, New Zealand, um, and of course, if you're elsewhere, you can always get creative and use like a freight forwarding service. Um, so we've been really fortunate to reach customers all over the world.
And then have you thought about what is life for you after Embr Labs?
I have, yeah. I feel really blessed to have learned so much on this journey, and yeah, I think that want to carry that forward in a few ways. One is obviously could see starting another company. Second could see just more of the advising consulting path of saying, hey, I could help other founders avoid some pitfalls. And so definitely interested in that as well. That could be consulting, it could be advising, it could be independent board member. And then of course also think, that also could be interesting for investing, right? Have obviously seen the investor side of the table. I think that's really interesting. I think, the combination of, technical skills as an engineer I have with the, finance and business skills would be valuable there. So all of those are very interesting. And, at this point, just trying to be open-minded, meet as many people as possible so that, when the time comes to really seriously think about that opportunity, can leverage my network and, and see what's out there.
Wow. And then the last question that I always ask is very personal. When I was 13, I fell off a horse and I was in coma, and I got back 4 days later. And ever since, I always think about what is my essence? Who am I when I'm not here in time and space? So that is the question for you. Have you thought about who are you when you're no longer here? What defines your essence?
What a beautiful question. It is something I've thought about. I think of myself as a spiritual person, and I've done a lot of journaling over the years, have a strong journaling practice and meditation, and have, always been interested in consciousness and different forms of experience. And from what I've seen, the kind of the true essence is to really recognize that being is a gift from the universe, and to show sort of gratitude for that. So probably the simplest version of that is just love. Like the essence is love, is to show that you love life and love the gift of getting to be here and have this experience. And if you can reconnect to that sort of cosmic consciousness, um, that makes everything else better.
Yeah, I think at least for me, that puts everything in perspective, because it's just not, it ceases to be about me. It's about one drop in the ocean that makes the ocean. Yeah. So
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm a scientist and engineer by training, and so you think about that. Fundamentally, we're made of atoms, and all atoms came from the Big Bang, and so literally, it's all one source, and we're just in a certain configuration of these atoms and molecules to be us. But at the end of the day, in the grand scale of time, it's all just the same source of energy in different forms.
well, and you do know about energy,
Especially temperature.
especially temperature. Uh, Sam, thank you so much for being with us. If you have any last words, the mic is yours. I really, really appreciate you coming and sharing your drops of wisdom.
My pleasure. Always happy to connect with folks. So LinkedIn's the best way to reach out to me. Sam Shames. I do my best to try to respond to DMs. So would love to connect with any listeners.
So I met Sam many years ago when they were raising money for Embr Labs. I was very interested in the technology, not for heat waves, for menopause, because I'm way above that, or beyond that, but for the impact on the compliance with chemotherapy and biologics for cancer treatment. Because I invest a lot in cancer and cancer treatments, we found out that one reason why people are not compliant with their treatment is because of the heat waves. We also found that they had other uses. The technology is extremely robust, but we don't invest only in technology. We invest in people who are fundamentally good people. And I hope you enjoy the humility and the kindness of Sam, and how it is a contrast to the many founders that are portrayed in the media of being extremely aggressive and hustlers, because there are other ways to run companies. Thank you so much for listening. Yours in Wealthing is Alicia Castillo Holley, and I hope I can see you in our next episode. Thanks for tuning in to our Wealthing Talks. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. To stay connected, visit us at wealthing.com. This is Alicia Castillo Holley, your host, and until next time, yours in Wealthing.